Hi, my name is Jason Hinch. I'm a developer, and I'll be talking about rapid development with ActiveObjects. Just quickly about me, I currently work in the FishEye and Crucible team, front-end team. Main skills are in Java, Python, and JavaScript. I've been working at Atlassian for 18 months. In a previous life, I did Confluence plugin development and Perl development. Just an agenda for today. I'll be looking at why I started using ActiveObjects, and then look at what ActiveObjects actually is. Then taking you through how to get started with ActiveObjects, defining entities, creating, reading, updating, deleting those entities, writing upgrade tasks, and how to test your plugins. So the way that I started with ActiveObjects was that I had an idea. I wanted to bring Bamboo data into FishEye and Crucible. I wanted to bring it into the commit graph, the change set page, and the review page, and trigger builds. So I'll just give you a quick demo. All right, so what you're looking at here is the commit graph. Can everyone see that? You want me to make it a bit bigger? This is the commit graph. It was released in 2.6 of FishEye. If you look up there, we have these are swim lanes, and they represent branches within your repository. And each of these nodes represents a change set within that branch. So you can see that we have a default branch, and then we have a feature branch over here. So we're on the Bamboo highlighter. This is the one that I wrote. And you can see that there are green dots and red dots. The green ones represent passing builds, and the red ones represent failing builds. You can see that visually, you can see that a bit of code was merged in right here, and you can see that that is the cause of the failure. And you're able to click through to Bamboo as well as the change set page and get that data on the change set page as well. So the first problem that I had with wanting to display this data in FishEye was that I had to fetch a lot of data from Bamboo. The commit graph fetches 100 to 250 change sets slice, and I had to fetch data from Bamboo associated with those. So fetching them on the fly from Bamboo just wasn't an option. I didn't want to have an external dependency. If Bamboo was running slow or it was down, you could end up with timeouts. And again, I wanted a large amount of data fast. So I needed a way to cache it on the FishEye side. So I looked at a way to store that data, and ideally it would hook up into backup and restore of FishEye. So previous solutions that the FishEye team have used within plugins, some plugins have used an in-memory cache. This is really not ideal because you'll be using Java heap space, which is shared by other plugins as well as the host application, and it's not persistent. So this could lead to a sluggy application as well as other plugins being sluggish. Flat files is another option. With that, you have to deal with serialization, and then if you're trying to evolve your entities and your domain objects over time, you have to deal with how the serialization deals with that. You can use cell property sets, but this isn't performant in FishEye because it's stored in the config XML. So if you're starting any large amount of data past maybe a plugin configuration, you will get little to no performance out of that. Some plugins have even gone to the extent of managing their own database, so whether it be embedded or an external one. And the problem with that is that you have another admin screen or configurations in order to connect to that database, and it also doesn't tie into the backup and restore of the native application. So that's where ActiveObjects comes in. Essentially, it allows you guys to store your domain objects in the application's database as native SQL tables. So let's talk about what ActiveObjects is. When I talk about ActiveObjects, I'm often referring to two different things, and I refer to them interchangeably. There's the ActiveObjects library, and then there's the Atlassian ActiveObjects framework. So the ActiveObjects library, it's hosted on java.net. It's an open source library. It provides a lightweight object relational mapping and allows you to define your schemas using Java annotations. You're able to do all the fun stuff with entities, creating them, reading them, finding them. It also handles upgrades. It's built on top of standard JDK technologies such as Java Dynamic Proxies and JDBC, so it has pretty much no external dependencies. If we look at the ActiveObjects framework, that's what Atlassian is providing to you guys as plugin developers. It's a superset of the library, and it allows as I said, it allows the plugins to write their data into the application's database. It also has the benefit of plugging into the application's lifecycle. So it hooks into the backup and restore. You're able to use cell transactions. And it also hooks into the plugin lifecycle. So when you install or uninstall a plugin, enable it, disable it. An easy way to tell the difference between the two is that the ActiveObjects library uses the net.java.ao package. You can see that there's a link there. Don't write it down. I'll post it up on the wiki afterwards. And then the ActiveObjects framework has the com.atlassian.activeobjects package. Again, don't write that down. Before I get into how to get started with things, just briefly, supported products. It's completely supported in FishEye 2.7 and Crucible 2.7 and Jira 4.4. The other applications, Bamboo and Confluence, have a partial support for it, and they don't support the backup and restore functionality yet, and it's not bundled within the application. But they're coming soon, I believe. But I would talk to those teams for details. So ActiveObjects, its philosophy is based on the active record pattern. And this is used within many frameworks. If you're from the Python world, it's based on Django. If it's what Django uses. If you're from Ruby, it's what Ruby on Rails uses. Essentially, you abstract your database access behind native programming classes and objects of that language. So a class or an interface will map to a table within your database, and an instance of that object will map to a row within that table. So you can very naturally interact with your objects within your programming language, and which will then, underneath the hoods, will interact with the database and update and insert and delete things there. So I'll show you how to get started. I'll be showing a lot of code examples. Feel free to stop me at any time. I'll have a bit of time for a few questions during the slides. So we have, you just put this dependency in your pom.xml. And the version here, which is 0.15.10, is the version that was shipped in Crucible and FishEye 2.7. I'm not sure what's in Jira. It's not a 1.0 release yet. We're trying to commit as much code as we can and get it to a 1.0 standard as quickly as we can. So those versions will change, but if you're going to start developing for one of the products now, try and pick the version that is shipped with that product. So in our Atlassian plugin XML, we're defining a AO module type. So in the AO module type, we just have a key, and then we have entities here. And these entities refer to classes within your class path that your entities are defined at. Let's have a look at one of the entities. So this entity is my Bamboo results entity. It's what's used to store all the results for whether a build passed or failed. It has a few columns. It has a few fields here. It has a get ID, has a get and set key, set state, and set CSID, and has a foreign key to the Bamboo plan. You can see that it has annotations on it. You can define indexes, not null. And you can see that, so if you look up here, the interface is called Bamboo result. That we'll transform that, and that will roughly equate to what the table name is. And the getters and setters will roughly equate to what the column names are. You can see that I'm using this accessor and mutator annotations right here, and I'm changing it so that it's actually result key. What do you think that this does in your database, and why would I be doing it right here? What would this be doing in terms of the column name? No? I think I heard that. So the reason why I'm overriding it, so this will, instead of calling the column key, it will call it result key. The reason why I'm doing that is because key is a reserved word in SQL. I ran into this problem in dog food and production environment. I'll be talking about it a bit later as to how I dealt with that with an upgrade task. But there are some kind of things that you have to be aware of as a developer on using ActiveObjects. You're dealing with a live database, and there's a lot of responsibility. That's one of the things that didn't show up in testing against Hypersonic, but it did in testing against our production environment, which is running SQL Server. Okay, so back to basics. Essentially, we have to define an interface to define one of your tables that you want to create, and it must extend raw entity. That raw entity class provides a bunch of methods. I'll look at them later on. And essentially, it's parameterized by what your primary key is, whatever the type is. You could define your entity to have a string, whatever type you wanted. But you don't have to use this raw entity directly. There is a convenience interface, the entity interface, which will provide you that ID for free. So if you don't care what that column name is, or you don't really care what your unique identifier is, then it's probably best you use this one. Otherwise, if you need more control, then use the raw entity directly. So here's the raw entity interface. So see that we have these ignore annotations on all these methods. So can anyone tell me why they think that these ignore annotations would be needed? Bo? It's not an attribute, exactly. It's not a column in the database. So we're annotating this method to say this isn't supposed to be a column in the database. It's supposed to be, it provides some sort of interaction with this instance of this interface. And so I'm not going to look at it in this talk, but you can actually define domain logic and implementations for methods on your class. Come up and talk to me about that, and I can show you some code for it if you're interested. But essentially, it defines these methods, and it is a callback to the constructor of the object. Of course, it's an interface, so we don't actually get a constructor here. But we have an init method. We have save, which will persist updates to the database. We have a couple of convenience methods here for getting the entity manager and type. And if you're using an observer pattern, you can use that property change listener and listen for changes on different properties. So we'll quickly have a look at what an entity equates to within the database. So we have a stripped-down version of my Bamboo result interface that we saw before. It's annotated with an auto increment, not null, and primary key annotation. And so what that equates to is we have a create statement here. We take all interface names and getters and setters. We take the camel case, and the convention for it is to convert everything to uppercase and underscored separated. That's defined within the framework, so you don't have to worry about that. Essentially, that's what happens. You can see down here that it's not a direct translation. We have these two prefixes here. Does anyone know why we'd need to prefix things? Yeah, Bo? Name? Yep, so you can see this number here so I'll start with the AO. The AO is so that it doesn't clash with the underlying the host applications tables, so that we know that all plugin data will be namespaced with AO. Then we have essentially a hash. I believe it's of the plugin key. And that's so that different plugins won't clash with each other, with the tables. Bo? I'm not sure, but you can actually define, there is an option within the XML that you can override what's used to hash that. So you can define a namespace for your tables. So if you do run into some sort of problem or you rename your plugin key, you can keep the same tables. That answers your question. So we have, so this is a bit more advanced option here. I just added the key getter here. So what that does is it's exactly the same, except it's got this result key column right here, as we'd expect. It's defined as a varchar size 255. You can override that default if you want, for instance, full text for the default implementation of a string. You use I believe it's the @SQL type annotation. It's in the Java docs, so just have a look at those. And you can see that I've annotated with an indexed annotation, and it's creating an index on that column. So now that we've defined our entity, how do we interact with it? And so the first thing I needed to do was I needed to be able to create things in the database. And this is how we do it, and it has two different flavors. You have access to this ActiveObjects service. This is provided to your plugin, and you can inject it into your servlet or your component. And you can use this to interact with the database. So ao.create, this method will do an insert statement into your database. And you can pass in a vararg of DB params, or you can pass in, this is a map. I've just got a map builder there. And you can see that I'm passing in all the values that are required for this column front. I'm not calling the setters. Why? Does anyone know why I'd be doing this? Why I'd be passing things up front? Yes, that's true. But let's just say that's completely correct. But let's just say, so this method actually returns an instance of that interface using proxies. Why wouldn't I just grab that object and then call one of the setters on it and then call save? Bo? I think you got it at the end where I was trying to look for, is essentially, yes, it makes two database calls, but also because I define those fields as not null, if you remember. So I have to pass those in. That create method will make an insert statement. It doesn't pass you back a proxy that you can then call save and it will do an insert. This actually literally does the insert. So you can see that it's fairly simple to do that. We're just passing in string params, which is the name of the column with the value afterwards. So now that I've created one, I want to be able to fetch things out. of the database. And this is relatively simple in AO. There's two different flavors that you can use to fetch things out of the database. The first one, and the easiest one, is to do it by primary key. So there is an AO.get method, pass in your entity class, and then you pass in the primary key. You can also pass in a vararg of primary keys, and it will give you back an array. In ActiveObjects, anything that's returned that's actually multiple items will be an array. So you define in your interfaces, if you define foreign keys and things like that, you'll need to use arrays. And from the AO class, it returns arrays. It doesn't return collections or anything like that. So you can see that it has a get method. It also has a find method. This find method right here will return every result in that table into this array. But we often want to do complex select statements. So that's where the query class comes in. This is provided by the library, and you can do complex joins. You do all sorts of things. So here I'm doing a select, joining on the bamboo plan table, and I'm joining on these particular columns. Then I'm doing a where CSAD equals question mark and plan key equals question mark. So the where clause uses a prepare statement style query, and you pass in the values as a vararg afterwards. You can also do offsets, limits. You can essentially do anything that you can do most things that you do in a select statement within the query object. And the benefits is that it's partially typed, so you do get some safety and abstracts away most of the SQL logic. And you can see down the bottom here what that equates to in SQL. This dialect is hypersonic. You can see that it's limiting. The offset's 200, and it's returning up to 100 results, and it's doing the join and the where clause right there. Now that we've got these entities, these instances of these of our classes, we want to be able to update them. They're really easy to do. That's very simple in ActiveObjects. You fetch it out of the database, a get or a find, and then you call one of the setters on it. So for instance, here I'm calling set enabled equals false, and then I'm calling .save plan. That .save method will do an update statement against the database. So once that save statement has executed, it will be in the database. Deleting is just as simple. You just pull it out of the service, and then you just call ao.delete on that entity, and it will delete it from the database. So now that I've kind of looked at the basics, we really need to look at something a bit more complicated, which is a transaction. So transactions are important. For instance, in here, I'm lazily creating, so I have two classes here. I have a Bamboo and my two interfaces. I've got my Bamboo server, my Bamboo project. Because you can hook up multiple projects to multiple servers to your FishEye instance and then have multiple projects with it. Under that, we have these two interfaces. And I'm lazily creating these Bamboo servers, instances in the database. So what I'm doing is I'm executing in a transaction, then calling create on the server. If it doesn't exist, then I'm creating the project after that. If this call fails, the whole thing will be rolled back because I'm executing in a transaction. But if it executes correctly, it will be fine. This executing transaction will essentially, on your connection in JDBC, will begin the transaction on that connection object, and then the end will commit that. So after doing all that, as I said before, I ran into a second problem, and it was mainly that key is a reserved word problem. But what I really wanted, I needed a way to migrate and evolve my model. And I wanted it to be versioned, and I wanted to know I needed to know when an upgrade had run. So ActiveObjects provides that for us. It provides upgrade tasks. Again, as I said, they're versioned. They allow you to do schema migrations, and they also allow you to do data population or manipulation within your data, within the upgrade task. It's quite easy to define. We'll edit our Atlassian plugin XML, and we'll just add this upgrade task tag right here, and it will just reference what that class is. So that class implements this interface. This interface has two methods. The ActiveObjects upgrade task has a get model version. That is essentially what version of the model we are upgrading to, that it's targeting. And then we have an upgrade method, which is where all the logic for your upgrade happens. And you get past an ActiveObjects service right there. And so you're able to use that as you would in your normal code. So let's have a look at importing data. So I've defined my version, model version up the top. And then the first thing I do is I call ao.migrate. What I do is I pass in all the entities that I require for my project. Any entity, any interfaces that's missing from this call will be deleted, and anything that is new will be added. That's really important. So just say if I only passed in the result, all the other tables would be deleted. So it's really important to make sure that you pass in the correct things into this call. After I've created my schema, I build this case. This is just a wrapping class around the logic dealing with ActiveObjects. And then I'm iterating over every single entity that has a Bamboo project associated with it in UAL. And then I'm creating a project for that D-link. So that's how I can easily import data into my schema. Adding and deleting things is just as simple. As I said before, when you call that ao.migrate method, you need to make sure that the interfaces that you pass into that method are the ones that you want to be at that point in time. And any fields, any new fields that are on those existing entities will be created, and any ones removed will be removed. That's all well and good, but I wanted to rename a column. We know that this isn't possible in SQL. So essentially, I needed to find a way in order to do that, and it's not too hard to do in ActiveObjects. So this is what a stripped-down version of what I had. I just had the get and set key, and you can see that it's not annotated with the accessor methods. What I wanted to get to was this. I wanted to add an indexed annotation, and I also wanted to define it as these accessor mutators. So the way that I did that, and that you can do that, is that you take original class, original interface, and you rename it, or copy it. I've copied it to Bamboo Results version 1.5, and I've annotated with the annotation. That will tell ActiveObjects that I'm actually referring to the Bamboo result table. And it's not going to be a Bamboo result v1p5 table. So that's really important annotation. That allows you to have multiple versions of your schema over time, and it will always refer to the same table. I've then also added this get result key and set result key accessor mutator. And I've defined that as not null because we don't have any default values for that yet. You can define default values if you want, but what I want to do is I want to copy these values from here into these. So we'll have a look at the implementation. First of all, I call a ao.migrate, and I pass in that interface that I created, the copy. and that will migrate it, and it will add that column, that result key column, and it will be nullable. So everything should be fine at that point in time because it's added that column and it's modified the schema on all the existing data. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate over every single result. I'm going to get the key and then set it to the result key. So I'm getting the value out of the key column and I'm putting it into the set result key column, into the key column. And then I'm calling save. Finally, after I've done all that, I call ao.migrate, and then that's my destination interface right there. So what that will do is it will delete that key column, and then it will add the not null and index to that result key column. So the third problem that I ran into, but it's always going to be, it's of course going to be your first problem because you're using tests first, is that I wanted to test my code. I wanted to test it against multiple databases, and this is really important. We're giving you guys a lot of power in order to store data within the applications database. And so we need to give you guys an away, and it's really important that you test against multiple databases. If you're going to be shipping something that's going to be publicly available, you need to ensure that these kind of differences between database schemas, which aren't completely abstracted away from ActiveObjects, don't affect your plugin. So the way that we do that, we add a dependency to our pom.xml with the scope test, and that will this ActiveObjects test dependency provide us the ActiveObjects library testing dependency, as well as the part of the ActiveObjects framework. So the way that we write our unit test is that we have to use the ActiveObjects JUnit runner. We only currently support JUnit in terms of providing a runner. If you're using another testing framework, feel free to contribute one. So I've annotated it with this, and this is going to go away and set up my database for me. So in my setup method, you can see that I've got this test ActiveObjects class. This is just a test version of the ActiveObjects service that you'll get in your plugin. And so you can call all the methods that you had on that. So I'm calling migrate right here. You can see that I've got the entity manager injecting that into the test ActiveObjects. The entity manager is injected by the test runner on every single before the setup call on every single test. So you don't really need to know what the entity manager is. Essentially, all it is just the underlying parts of the AO library, but you only need to deal with the ActiveObjects service. So once we've set up that, we've called migrate, that your database is all set up for testing and running your code. So within your test method, all you do is just interact with AO exactly how you would within your live application, and you'll be able to test it exactly the same. So let's have a look at a few examples of how to, of what you might, so one thing that you might want to do is that, I was calling the migrate method in the setup. If you want to make that more reusable, you can use the @data annotation. And that allows you to implement this data updater interface, and you pass in that implementation into the data annotation, and you apply that to your class. Then inside your class, you can see that you can call the migrate method, and then you can create things within the database. So if you need to pre-populate your data, you can. And this is the easiest way to do it. But as I was saying before, you can test against multiple databases. If you have specific requirements, just say you're making it for an internal plugin or for a client, and you're only, for instance, you're only targeting Oracle, you could add the @JDBC annotation to your class, and you pass in the Oracle class into that. That will tell the ActiveObjects test runner to use the Oracle driver. But if you want to use the same tests against multiple databases, which is what I wanted to do, there's provided this dynamic JDBC configuration. Essentially what that does is it delegates the responsibility of defining what database to run against to a Java property. You can see that right here, I'm setting ao.test.database to Oracle. And so this makes it really easy to set up a Bamboo plan and then run the same test against multiple databases so that you can thoroughly test your persistence layer. So today, I've shown you how to get ActiveObjects into your plugin. I've shown you how to evolve your schema over time and how to test it against specific databases. The best way to contact me is via answers.atlassian.com. Me and a lot of other people that are helping to maintain and contribute to ActiveObjects will be here, as well as just people from the teams. That's my Twitter handle, and if you have any bugs in ActiveObjects, you're best to raise them in our studio instance. I would advise against raising them against the library, which is on java.net, because some of the issues you may be facing may be specific to Atlassian. So it's better if we have a look at them, and then if they are actually to do with the library, we can then delegate it. But we just don't want to annoy them, and they often get lost. Thank you. Questions?